a little more progress on figuring out the oil system on this car at the moment. I did work out in the end what the little hole was for. This is where the oil gauge takeoff goes through, and I've got the parts for that. It's actually this piece here. So there's this banjo, and one of these tubes goes to the bottom of this manifold, and you can see that provides a threaded 1/8 takeoff on this side, and there'll be fiber washers and things inside there. The reason I didn't realize that straight away is because I've got 2 of these, so I thought maybe they were something to do with the cam gear, but they're not. That comes later. I also realized that I can remake these pipes. These are just copper, but I actually have, little focus, here we go. I actually have some copper and nickel fuel line, or brake line, which is the right diameter. So this is 1/4 inch tube, which I should be able to use to remake these. This is then 3/8 because I want to redo all this because these are really badly bent and squashed, and I still need to figure out exactly how these fittings are supposed to go together. There's a bit of odd cobbling together going on here, so I need to make sure I understand exactly how all that's supposed to go, but it will just clear everything. I'll also redo this pipe because that's just awful. Now the top end, so the feed for the rocker gear on this engine is external. So I need to just make sure that the block is external. I'm pretty sure it is, because the later ones had internal feeds, and it's different blocks and different heads and different rocker covers. So I need to be absolutely certain when I put this together that the oil is going where it needs to go and not going places it shouldn't go. But the oil feed comes off the bottom of that. This is this one here. So comes off this piece, and that will comes up through the rocker cover. There's lots of space. There's a big hole up under here, and then it comes up through this brass pipe, and that then goes to the Y pipe, which goes to the front of the 2 rocker boxes. So I do have a Y pipe here, but this is obviously homemade, and I can't see any way that this is supposed to work because these aren't banjos. These are just blocks of brass with a hole in the side. So how they would expect that the oil to get through that into the bolt and into the rockers, I'm not sure. These end pieces are available through the spares, so I'll buy a couple of those, the proper banjos, and then I can make up the bolts. But this shows how there's a join in the pipe, I believe. So when this comes out here, you can join the 2 pipes together and remove the top of the engine if you need to. Now the rocker boxes, these are the earlier ones, and you can see there's no feed up to here, which you do see on some of the later ones. I've got some of those somewhere. This is one of the blanking plugs that goes in one end, and then if you look at the rocker shafts, they're all hollow, and there's also 2 different sorts of these. So you can see these ones actually have a threaded hole in the end. I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to get mine to work, but I did find in my pile of parts these little pieces, or one of these, and it's a threaded bung with 2 slots in the side so you can screw it in, and a 1/4 inch threaded hole through the middle. So the rocker shafts obviously fit through here, and there's a little cutout so when the bolts go through they can't move. These all effectively lock together, and then I believe this would go in the end here, and then you would have the proper banjo fitting on top of there with copper washers or fiber washers either side, And then there's a 1/4-inch bolt that goes through there that's drilled through the end and cross-drilled to meet up with the banjo. And that's, I believe, how oil gets up to the top end. So I need to make sure that is all correct. You're just kind of assuming or relying on the oil making its way through these. So I better make absolutely certain that these are clear. That one is, I can see right through it. I can't quite get the angle right, but I believe that's how it's supposed to work on mine. I'm not sure. These ones here with the threaded ends, if you look at them compared to the ones with the unthreaded ends, this is one off a later engine where it's got the feed coming up through the rocker cover, and you can see the extra little hole there. This one doesn't have that extra hole. So this is for external feed. This one, I'm not sure exactly what this is off, because if you look at where the holes are, they're in the wrong place for my rockers. These two are correct. I've already looked at those and made sure that that's where the rockers actually sit. So again, this is where you have to be really careful, because there's parts which are dimensionally the same, but with slightly different features on them that affect how they behave in the engine. So you do have to be really careful about that. I'm not sure about things like this, where you can see that's breaking through into that shaft. I don't know if that's a good thing, because it means you'd be losing oil pressure, I would have thought. But I don't believe the rockers need a lot of oil, which is why the holes are so small. So I'm still puzzling that out and figuring out exactly what I've got and how I'm going to make it work. And I think that's the thing in this case, is you just make it work with what you've got. So that's the Riley. Obviously it's Christmas holidays at the moment, so it's going to be hard to get anything. Like I say, I can reuse these. I should be able to. These are just soft soldered, so I can unsolder these. Most people say you should really silver solder these up, which I can do once I figure out exactly how they all go together. But it should be okay to reuse these fittings if they unsolder cleanly. And I'll have to wait until after the holidays to be able to get more pipe. The other thing I did is I put the sump on, and this pickup is in the correct place, which is good. It actually, the sump's up on a shelf there, but it actually has this plate on the bottom, which kind of fits about there. So the pickup is actually picking up from inside this. So it kind of goes on there. What else have I done? I have shortened the handbrake lever. I remember that somebody had actually sent me a picture of theirs that they're using in their Brooklyns, and it was such a good picture I was able to import that into my CAD program and measure it and figure out the exact length of it. So I was able to cut it down. For now, I've just got a piece of, that's black heat shrink on there, rubberized heat shrink. I did the same on my MGB, because originally this would have been cellulose, I guess. And on the MG, after a few years of use, it actually gets quite shiny and black. I'll try and figure out if there's something I can polish that with, but as it is, that works pretty well. So that should hopefully clear the scuttle. I don't think you'd want to make it any shorter, but you can see the sort of ratchet mechanism there. So that's how the handbrake mechanism works. So, whoops, that this is the adjuster. If I find it, I might need to adjust the little ball. There's a little spring and plunger in there with a ball that's supposed to lock that in place. But you can see how adjusting this will adjust the handbrake from within the car. You can see if you adjust it down, you can change the amount of pull on it, which is quite cool. So, and there'll always be some tension on that, of course. So that's done. That came out quite nicely. And I think that's everything on the Riley at the moment. And I've been poking around a bit with the new car, so we'll go have a look at that as well. That is one thing I need to consider when I do assemble all the oil piping on this engine. I want to test it before I put the rocker gear in and things like that to make sure oil is going to all the places it needs to go. And often on other sorts of cars you can do that because you can spin the oil pump independently. So on some cars it's sort of underneath the distributor drive. On the Austin it is, I can't actually remember where it is. On the end of the dynamo drive, I think. I'd have to think about that one. But I can remember there are ways you can spin them without spinning over the whole engine. On the Riley though, because the oil pump is driven off these little eccentric arms off the intermediate gear, to operate the pump you have to turn the intermediate gear, which means turning the crank because it's driven by the crank. So I'm not sure, given it's a sort of piston pump like that, I suspect I should be able to assemble all the oil gear and set it up with just a little trough under the pickup. Obviously I'll turn the engine over. I should be able to assemble everything with all the right gaskets and all the right bits and pieces and turn the flywheel over by hand or with a bar on the pulley bolt, on the flywheel bolt, and actually turn this over and see if that will pump oil to all the places that it needs to go to. I think that's probably going to be the way I have to do it. And then I can make sure it's actually going to oil everywhere it needs to oil. And I've started playing around a bit with this Land Rover, just tidying it up. I don't think it's ever been cleaned. It's absolutely filthy. I've cleaned it a couple of times already and the dirt is just kind of baked onto it. So I'll have to try it with some degreaser, I think. But I found out a few interesting things. There's a hose here that goes to the back of the car, I believe, that was just completely rotted. I think that's the rear window washer. And I discovered there was a Bowden cable down here that was just totally disconnected. And I figured out where it went in the end. I actually bought a Haynes manual for the car, which helped. But the car always seemed a little bit sort of gutless, or it didn't behave exactly how I thought a V8 would behave. Not that I've got much experience with them. But it turns out that cable was the automatic gearbox kickdown cable, and it just wasn't connected at all. So I don't know why it would have been disconnected. There's no way it could have fallen off. It was deliberately left off. So I reconnected it and set it up as it said to in the manual, and took it for a test drive, and it's much better. So it behaves how I'd expect it to, where if you're driving along at 50k in top gear and you floor it, it kicks down now and it takes off, which is how I would have expected it to be. So no idea why that was disconnected, just if it was meant to be for some reason, but I don't know what that would have been. So we'll see how that goes. And I've been sort of cleaning up the bumper. One side's always been a bit rattly, and if you look at this side, taking this apart was not too bad. It was a little bit tricky on this side. There's a bracket that kind of goes in there, let's see, and there's a rubber mount and it goes up to the body. The screw up here was completely rusted and bent, and I had a hard job getting that off. I managed to get it undone a bit of the way, and then it jammed, and then of course you can't turn it. And then I remembered that's why I invested in some air tools and things. So I got those out, first time I've ever really used it, and was able to cut off the offending bolt. It's just an M10 bolt, so nothing special. But I had to do that because this part of the bumper, there's a screw that holds it on that goes through this hole. So with this bracket on, it's a bit daft. you can see there's no way to get to the head of that screw. So you have to take this bracket off first, and then you can undo this. The front of it is just held with, there's bolts with nuts on them from the inside, so that was really easy to get off. But then this side's always been a bit dodgy, and somebody had obviously repaired it. I knew that because they just put a screw through the side of the bumper, which is an okay way to repair it, except they'd used a horrible screw. I think what I'll do is I'll get some button head socket screws or something, just black ones, so I can replace those and replace the screws on the front overrider bit and just make it look a bit neater. But obviously this was rattling around, and somebody's tried to fix it with piles and piles of silicone, and I don't know what that's for. I don't know why. I can't see, unless this has come loose and this is rattling, so they've tried to silicone it up, but it's a very dodgy sort of repair. So I should be able to make that better. I mean, this was obviously done by someone who doesn't have any tools or know what they were doing, so I can't see anything really broken there. But I'll give it a clean up while it's all apart, and I'll clean up the parts and then see how best to repair that. But it's quite fun working on a car, again, that's just a simple old car that just needs a bit of easy maintenance type stuff fiddling around, rather than having to build a car from scratch. The only other car I've got is my little MGB, which I restored quite a few years ago, so there's not really anything to do on that except normal maintenance, and that was the manual I got. So yeah, it's just trying to make it look a little bit more presentable. I'm not going to go too mad, I'm not going to restore it, but just clean it up and make it look a bit tidier. You know, clean up the plastics and things. But it's good. A little distraction from when I get sick of trying to figure out how this Riley goes together, or am busy waiting for parts for it. Very quick update on this. Took apart the other side. It's obviously just been dinged in the past, and the plastic bumper got broken, and this bracket was all bent up, and they just hadn't straightened it. They just repaired it the best they could, which was basically gobs and gobs of silicone and a screw through there. So I've taken all that off, I've just straightened that up, and I'll probably do the same thing just with those socket head screws or button head screws through from the outside of the bumper. I think it'll just be easier, but there's nothing wrong with any of that, so that should be quite easy to fix. I've washed all the plastic bits, they're sitting outside at the moment, and I may, maybe not tomorrow, I think it's supposed to rain, but the next good fine day I might take this out, give it a light sand just where the rust is starting to come through. Just in there, I don't think there's even any actual rust, it's just a bit of surface rust. So I'll just clean that up, and I may just give that a spray of black just to tidy it up. I think that'll be fine.